Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of Hino Teaches. My name is Jose Hinojosa, and today we'll be talking about my research topic, asynchronous versus asynchronous instruction, which is more appropriate for student success. Let's take a look. Okay, first let's take a look at the abstract. It says the topic I chose to research is to understand the difference between asynchronous instruction versus synchronous instruction, and to show by application of a one-way ANOVA analysis of variance test that synchronous instruction has a better result in student achievement. This test will have an independent variable, which is the type of instruction method, so you're going to see if it's either asynchronous instruction or synchronous instruction, with a dependent variable being the end of the year STAR math test scores from a sample size of 100 middle school students from my campus in Mission, Texas, called Excellence and Leadership Academy. Okay, next, let's talk about the literature review. In order to gain knowledge of my topic, I gathered 11 pieces of literature to help my research topic. I chose to use different types of literature such as scholarly journals, published articles, and peer reviews. Here's a couple of examples of what it could look like. Next is literature sources. Here's a compilation of the 11 sources that I used for my research project. You have some scholarly journals, some peer reviews, and some journals. Next, we have research method. It says the method most suitable for this type of research study is a variance test to compare two groups with a valid result based on data collection and analysis. So basically what I chose to do was use the ANOVA or analysis of variance test through the method of one way. Okay, so basically you have an independent variable, which would be the instructional method of either asynchronous or synchronous instruction. Okay, then you have your dependent variable, which would in this case be the math test results for the middle school students. And also the way I chose my students was through purpose sampling, which I'll talk about next. Okay, next we have purposive sampling. So this is the method that I chose to select the participants. So let's take a look. It says, for this research study, I chose purposive sampling because it allows the researcher to choose the participants in the study based on the researcher's knowledge and experience with the participants. So it kind of lets you choose who you want based on the entire population. Okay, so next says the researcher may choose the best participants that they think will be a representative of the entire population of the study. It says my sample size will be 100 participants. So because I know the students, I can kind of choose which ones I think will be the best participants for this type of study. So, because I know that and I know the students, it'll allow me to kind of pick the right ones that's a representative of the entire population. So that's why I chose purposive sampling. Okay, so next let's talk about the ANOVA or analysis of variance test. So it says for my research topic, I chose to use the analysis of variance method or ANOVA test, which was developed by Ronald Fisher in the year 1918. So this is a test that's been around for a long time, so it's commonly used. It says the method allows me to measure the levels of variance with the two sample groups, which consist of sample group 1, which would be your asynchronous instruction participants, and group 2, your synchronous instruction participants. So you have two distinct groups that we'll be looking at. Okay, next, let's talk about the one-way ANOVA variance test. It says, I chose to use the one-way variance test method because it allows me to have an independent variable, which in my study would be either asynchronous or synchronous instruction methods. Next, it says, it also allows me to use a dependent variable, which in this case would be the STAR math scores from my middle school campus. So you have your independent variable, which is instructional method, and then you have your dependent variable, which is dependent on both the STAR math scores. Okay, and that's going to be for the middle school students, sampling size of 100. Okay, next let's take a look at the hypothesis. It says, I directly hypothesize that synchronous instruction will be the instructional method that will yield a higher student academic achievement. So I'm making a direct statement about my hypothesis. This is what I think is going to happen. Okay, so here's a kind of an illustration. Which side is it going to fall on, right? So this is the method I chose. This is my hypothesis. Okay, next, let's talk about the anticipated results. What am I anticipating and the outcome? So it says, at the conclusion of my research and analysis, I anticipate that synchronous instruction will show a greater student achievement outcome. So I'm expecting them to have a better student achievement outcome because they are participating in synchronous instruction. It says the analysis of variance should prove that synchronous instruction is better suited for student academic achievement. So I'm leaning towards synchronous instruction. We're anticipating that the results and the analysis are going to show that because they attend synchronous instruction, the students will have a greater student achievement based on that. Okay, next, we'll be talking about key concepts and learning points. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about 4 key points or learning points that I kind of got from the entire class, and it helped me kind of develop my research based off of this. So let's go ahead. Number 1, throughout this class, I learned that choosing the correct method for your research is key to the success with your outcome of the research. So in my case, after Dr. Jupp kind of went over my project, he was like, you might want to look at this chapter. And for me, it was going back and researching ANOVA or analysis of variance. Based on the criteria, I was able to see, well, there's 2 groups. We have an independent and a dependent variable, and I'm trying to find a variance. So that was the most suitable thing for me. That was one of the key concepts that I learned. Number 2, be concise with a sampling strategy that is the most appropriate for your research. In my case, it was purposive sampling and the sampling size. So I needed to make sure that I understood who was going to be participating, why they were going to be participating, and for me, that was purposive sampling. I had knowledge of the participants. I had already had experience with them, and it was going to allow me to kind of select the right participants for my research. Also, it's also appropriate to know about your sampling size. In my case, it was 100 participants. So I had to select the 100 best that are representative of the entire population of the middle school. Okay. Key concept number 3. Be sure to state your hypothesis on the onset of your study. Make sure to state what type of hypothesis you will use. So in my case, it's a directional hypothesis. I basically, at the beginning of the presentation, or a little bit earlier, I said that I directly hypothesize, right? This is what I think is going to happen. I stated what was going to happen. So knowing the difference between a directional hypothesis and a null hypothesis is key when you're doing research. Okay. Number 4, be sure to appropriate the maximum amount of time for your research and analysis. Do your due diligence. For me, it was like, okay, I need to make sure that I have enough time to read the book, do the research, make sure that I'm using the right terms, using the right analysis. So I had to make sure, go back and read after I got my what is it called, my draft, right? So I looked at my draft, I looked at the notes, I had to do my due diligence, go back, make sure I read the notes that Dr. Jupp read for me, right? So he had specific notes for me. I had to go back, read them, make sure I had the right method, which for me was analysis, make sure I had the right sampling strategy. For me was the purpose sampling. Make sure that I hypothesize, which was a directional hypothesis, and make sure that I appropriate enough time to create the project, select the sampling size, and make sure that I do everything with time. Okay, so for me that was key. The planning, do my due diligence, planning, making sure that I do everything correctly. This concludes my presentation on my research of asynchronous versus synchronous instruction and which instructional method is best suited for student achievement. Thank you for your time. Have a good one.